This is the Cleveland Podcast.
I'm all alone. I'm all alone.
Fred.
Caesar?
Hey, Fred.
I missed you, buddy.
Oh, have you been going crazy all locked up in your apartment?
Do you know how many times I've written Fred is a nice boy all over the walls in my apartment?
Red rum.
Okay, enough of the crazy act.
All work and no play makes Fred a dull boy.
That's right. I'll have an axe ready to go. Open up my own apartment door and goes, "Here's Freddy."
Oh, probably gonna have to pay a security deposit on that.
Oh, more than security deposit. I'll be evicted. Although I am considered the superhero of my apartment complex because I saved someone's life twice. So that was...
Yeah, that was a good thing. But I think that might be offset by putting an axe through the
Maybe.
door.
But it all depends on perspective because does a door feel pain? That is the question. Well, obviously, surprisingly, almost unbelievably, when this whole pandemic started, we thought that this would last for... Well, how long do you think this was going to last, Caesar?
I thought we'd be back by now.
Yeah,
by now.
By now. Certainly so. I thought that during May, I'm like, oh, there's hope. When things started to get rolled back a little bit, all of a sudden you can do some activities. Some people were commentating on, oh, well, we should probably get some activities back together and just prepare for the rest of the summer. And then lo and behold, we are still here inside our homes for almost a third of the year. That's just...
Not me.
I know, not you.
You know where I am today, right?
Yes.
The Brecksville Reservation. It's the quietest place that I could think of to go. I think my roommate's favorite pastime is making loud noises. So it makes it really difficult to record there. And I've tried. So I decided the best place to go was this area of Brecksville Reservation where they have closed off because the frogs are mating and they want the cars not to run over the frogs while they're doing the thing. And the babies are coming out. So the whole area, actually where you and I used to play Ultimate Frisbee, there's some hikers walking by. But other than that, there's no cars. There's no noise. It's the quietest place that I could think of to go. And
that's, I guess, one of the few benefits of this whole pandemic is that nature's probably like, hey, where all those big, tall, annoying animals go that drive their big metallic machines? They're gone. We can finally mate in public.
Get down to the voyeurism.
Indeed, it's still unbelievable to think that it's been a third of the year. So I guess, obviously, for our listeners, we have a little bit of an update on our own lives. I guess we'll start with you, Caesar.
Oh, well, I actually talked to you about a month ago, and I was going a little crazy. You ever have that friend who only talks to that one thing, and it gets really annoying really fast?
Yes.
I feel like everybody is that friend because there's not anything to talk about. There's the pandemic or the pandemic, because it's changing everything about our lives.
Absolutely.
So I jump online. People are talking about the pandemic. I jump on Facebook, pandemic. Jump on Reddit, pandemic. Get to my favorite podcast. They're talking about the pandemic. And it's just like everybody's talking about the same thing. And I was going crazy. I had to, I deleted my Facebook account. I couldn't take it anymore. With Reddit, it's especially hard because there's some crazy ideas out there. There's some people who really don't think before they talk about stuff. They just kind of say the status quo stuff. And I always just mark it up to them being like 13 because they're on Reddit. Everybody's anonymous. So you don't know.
Right.
I mean, okay, if that person said something dumb, they're probably, a 13-year-old or something, and they just haven't lived much of life. But with Facebook, when somebody says something dumb, it's your friend.
Right. It's
and
like,
I don't want to know that my friends are dumb. You know what I mean?
I just accept the fact that here's a way to put it, Caesar, and it's just that our friendship circles have a wide range in terms of people in our lives, in terms of characteristics and qualities. Some may not have some may be fully aware that they're not the sharpest tool in the shed. That's totally fine. It's just that at this point in time, we're all going crazy. So therefore we all think we're smart and we know how to solve this pandemic.
everybody's an expert right now, aren't they?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you keep track of all the little graphs and stuff in the New York Times regarding updates about cases around the country, you might feel like you're an expert.
And there's so many theories. You know, one of the theories is that the hospitals are jacking up the numbers because they get money. I think it was Elon Musk that said that.
That's right.
he was saying that they get money if it's a COVID death. They don't get money if it's a heart attack. And what Elon Musk was saying was that these hospitals need this money. So if somebody dies of a heart attack and they also have COVID, they say it was a COVID death so that they get that money. According to Elon Musk, they get money for that from the government.
And I hope I hope he has valuable sources for that, because that's quite the wild claim. We're supposed to be like, hey, Elon, you might be multi-billionaire, but at the same time, we know you're not the sharpest tool in the shed. A, because you gave your son a very long name that no one will understand. And B, you're making a huge argument without your sources. The most important thing in college and in graduate school, and for me in particular, since all this graduate school stuff is really popping up now for me, is cite the dang source. If you're making an argument, cite it. If you have to put 8 citations, do it. It looks more valuable than having this argument that everyone goes, whoa, that's so out there, man. It just sounds so true. But there are no valid sources. And trust me, it's not just go to some blog post of a guy rambling about lizard people. That's not a valid source. That is not a valid source, period. You got to go to some journals. When you're making article claims like that, you really got to dig deep. You got to be academically rigorous when you make claims like that.
Yeah. Well, he also threw his girlfriend under the bus for that name, for that kid's name.
Oh, that's true.
He's like, that part was her idea.
It's like externalizing the problem. You remember, naming a kid is a two-way street. You agreed to it too.
Speaking of which, when I was with my last girlfriend, my ex-girlfriend, some of our listeners may not know this. My name is not actually Caesar Salad. And I'm going to just reveal it so that people know. My name is Jebediah Gumbacher.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I'm a traveling gynecologist. By day. Podcaster by night. But when I was dating my last girlfriend, I said, we have kids. I want to name the first boy Caesar. And she said, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. And she just gave me the dirtiest look. I'm like, oh, that's not going to happen. So when we broke up, I'm like, well, I'm going to get a cat named Caesar. And then we started the podcast, and then we needed names. So I'm like, I'll call myself Caesar.
So we've gone from a kid to a cat to yourself. No, I think that's a fair transition.
And the way you've teased me about Caesar salad ever since I changed my name to Caesar, I'm glad that I never named the kid Caesar. Because he would have dealt with that same awful torture for his entire life. All the kids at school would have been like little Freds, you know?
Oh, yeah. Right.
Little Fred and little Caesar would be going to school together, and they'd be like, and little Fred would be like, hey, Caesar salad!
Oh, that's so true. I would tell him, now, little Fred, you have to name him Augustus Salad. Because he's the son of Caesar, technically. And if Augustus has a kid, you have to name him Tiberius Salad.
I've been going down a lot of rabbit holes just because there's so much free time.
Right.
Did you know that in, Revelation, the beast, the sign of the beast, 666, that's actually a Caesar? It's not Satan. It's Caesar.
Was it Nero?
Nero, yeah.
Yeah, you probably, how much you've read up on Nero? Because it's certainly, if you know his story, he sounds like the beast.
Yeah, well, and I think that's why they called him the beast. It's just that he's not Satan. People associate that 666 with sign of the beast. The beast is Nero Caesar, the government.
Right, who would have thought?
The heads of government. And
people were saying that everyone was saying, well, what do you think Jesus would think about this? And you have to go around and be like, Jesus was kind of a radical anti-government type of guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't the biggest fan of authority. So it's just kind of crazy. People go, really? It's like, yeah, look at this part. But, if people don't know that much about Nero is famous for falsely accusing people and crucifying them in public and then burning a third of the city, supposedly, in order to make a new palace for himself. And he would execute senators and all types of stuff. So pretty much once we hit Tiberius, which is the person after Augustus, except for Claudius, all those emperors are just nuts. Like, I think the person before Nero, which I think was, I'm trying to remember the name now. I'll have to get back to that name. But he was famous for proposing that a Senate be a horse be a senator amongst the Roman government, and it didn't pass, but it was up for debate before he died.
Some other things that aren't Satan.
Go on.
The serpent in the Garden of Eden.
Right.
It's a serpent. It never says he's Satan. It says he's a serpent. And then Lucifer is actually Venus, the planet. So they called Lucifer, Venus, a fallen angel because the angels were always in the same place. The stars are always in the same place.
Right.
And Venus would go out of order. So he was considered a fallen angel, and that is Lucifer.
Oh, I did not know that.
And so it's really weird how, and I guess there's probably other places in the New Testament where they, just for convenience, they say, guess what? The snake and the beast and Lucifer, they're all the same people. Just because we want it to be. It makes for a better story.
It makes sense. I mean, when you try, how can you tell when you're trying to get people to convert from paganism or Judaism to Christianity in the early stages of the Christian movement? How are you going to explain to people like, what's this beast thing? What's this Lucifer? And you just do this blanket term of the devil. And so people go, oh, that does sound bad, doesn't it? And so
apparently one of the reasons why the beast, they called it the beast instead of Nero Caesar, they did it in this way that's all metaphorical.
Right.
It's because they didn't want Caesar to find out about it.
Yes.
They killed him. Because if they hadn't written it in this like metaphorical way, it would have gotten them killed.
Yeah, right. Can you imagine Emperor going, what'd you call me? They would have certainly been part of the Colosseum's morning activities, which often involved the death of criminals and criminals fighting each other. They would have been part of those early festivities, the stars of the show before the evening Colosseum fights between gladiators.
It seems pretty apparent so far already as we're talking that this show's kind of formula is changing.
Yes.
We don't really have much of a choice, right?
Yeah, we have no choice.
I mean, our original thought was, hey, we're for people who are new to the city or that want to learn about the setting.
Right.
And we've got some criticism about that, pretty much where people said, yeah, you know what? Clevelanders are territorial, and you're not going to get them to listen to a show. Nobody cares what outsiders think of Cleveland.
Right.
So I think we're going to get away from that whole thing where we're reaching out to people from outside the city. And I think anything goes at this point. I mean, I think some of our best stuff has been when we just interview, let's think about the Matt and Stephanie episode.
Mm-hmm.
They could have cared less to talk about Cleveland. You know what I mean?
Right.
But even without that stuff, it was an extremely interesting episode, right?
Right.
So, and we've talked a little bit about this, but I think it'd just be good just to do whatever feels good.
I suppose. I think that might be the best avenue, the best angle. It seems like when we just do things of our own interest and just rather than necessarily talk about Cleveland all the time, we then get the most activity because our listeners go, oh, this is really quite different.
Oh, also, my sister has listened to the podcast.
Okay.
And she's not happy that I used the word fuck.
Oh, dear.
This is a not safe for work episode. This is a explicit episode, right?
Yeah, right. We just gotta put it that way and just go, look, I can't remember the name. Oh no, I can't remember the Caesar sister's name. Oh well. I was gonna have a good name for that, but you could say, look, sister, this is explicit, so you know that word that you don't like is in there.
I'll apologize to her every time I swear.
That's right.
But anyways, like that was the one that bothered her. Fuck, it's like, well, fuck just means for unlawful carnal knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
That should only offend like a pilgrim, right?
Right.
Shit. Those are like those are the two worst swear words, shit and fuck, right? Those are the ones that aren't allowed. Those are the ones that aren't allowed on TV, right?
Well, other ones too, but the most that are the most bleeped out for sure.
But those two words are so benign. You ever seen the Adam Sandler movie where they put a flaming bag of poop on the guy's doorstep and the guy comes to stomp it out and sticks his shoe in poop and the guy goes, it's poop again, and Adam Sandler and his friends are like, that guy calls his shit poop. Yeah,
there's strange things, but it's weird that we kind of allow people to talk about when we mention waste and we go, no, we shouldn't call it shit. We should just call it poop or waste. And you kind of go, well, it's always the same thing. So it's kind of this, it is bizarre, but who knows? Maybe many of the rules and laws and cultural expectations have strange origins.
Yeah. So I guess for unlawful carnal knowledge, it just, when you think about it, it really isn't that offensive, you know?
Yeah, sure. But we make it that way, though. It depends on the context. And I think people often think of the context, the negative context of the word. If you use it effectively, there are ways to use those words effectively. I know I've done it in my presentations for professionally and in school. Believe it or not, I've actually used it once or twice, and people go, that was actually effective. How did you do that? And I go, luck.
I think I was listening to a podcast called James O'Brien's Mystery Hour, if I remember right. That's where it came from. And they always ask questions like that. Where do these swear words come from? And,
right.
You know, one of these guys called in and he said, you know, it doesn't matter what culture you're from or what nation you're from or what time you're from. There are these forbidden words.
Right.
That exist. And they are always important culturally. I guess it's something that we need.
Yeah, it's like boundaries, I suppose, too. Kind of. Yeah, they always say that society is meant to make sure that us humans do not go down the path of absolute debauchery. I mean, have you ever read Lord of the Flies?
When I was in school, I did. Yeah, that's been a long time.
Yeah, I remember that book so clearly because it was a bunch of kids, and all of a sudden they're on this island with no rules, and they literally turn into murdering cannibals. And I think about it and I go, you guys are not even hit puberty yet. You have not even tried to go on a date with a girl yet. And now you are murdering your fellow boys and eating them.
Yeah, I do remember a scene from the movie. The teacher made us watch the movie.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
What we need around here is more positive thinking. And that guy got killed like 5 minutes later.
Yeah, right. This is a little bit of an ironic twist.
He was the fat kid, right?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't remember much of the movie. I remember watching it too, but it was God, it's been almost a decade.
That's the only thing I remember because we just walk around the hallways. What we need around here is more positive thinking.
Oh, that's very funny. I actually, do you know about the kind of like one of the biggest proponents of positive thinking, Norman Vincent Peale? I did a whole research paper on this guy, so I know this guy in detail. So this whole notion of if you use positive thinking, you can overcome any challenge. It kind of comes from this popular book called The Power of Positive Thinking. And so this guy, this Norman Vincent Peale guy, is just writing these pseudo psychology methods in order to improve one's happiness. And he kind of ties it to God. It's kind of like this pseudo-religious psychology philosophy book that kind of just goes on and on and on. And what's most fascinating is, you know that he was Donald Trump's pastor, right?
Oh, no, I didn't know that. So
I think the way it worked was Donald Trump's father knew Norman Vincent Peale because he was at this point, Norman Vincent Peale was more famous as a preacher rather than an author. And then all of a sudden, you had little Donald going into these sessions in New York, and he would come out, and it just left a huge impact on him. And so now that kind of explains a lot of his thinking and kind of like his process in terms of how he responds to things. Yeah. So it's kind of like this idea of using positivity in order to overcome any challenge. But the issue lies in the fact that if you become so obsessed with it, you won't really accept some of the negatives that you need to accept and improve. And that was one of the biggest complaints about the book, because I wrote a whole thing about how there are many people who were experts in their field in religion and psychology and history, and how they just panned this book. I remember one person, a Christian I think in a similar sect to Norman Vincent Peale, said, this book borders on blasphemy. And I remember thinking, you wrote that in an article published to hundreds, if not thousands of people around the world. And you say, a book that has sold 15 million copies borders on blasphemy. And I go, wow, that's bold. But this power of positive thinking thing, it's kind of interesting that people really took it to heart, and it's still quite popular. But then you also have movies like Lord of the Flies that kind of take little jabs at it by saying, all we need is positive thinking. as you're being eaten alive. But we still need positive thinking.
So we were talking about me shutting down my Facebook account.
Right. I
am so much happier now.
Absolutely.
You did the same thing. You did it first, right?
Oh, I did. I did way before you. I just was.
Are you back?
No.
Are you back on?
I'm potentially thinking about it only because of all my Toastmasters commitments. And turns out like Toastmasters loves Facebook. So I'm kind of just like, I probably should potentially just create this like anonymous account that's like TI Fred. That's a Toastmasters International Fred, and just proceed from there to just do all the Facebook activities I need for Toastmasters. Because one of these strange things is when I deleted the account, the reason I did it for myself is I kind of could sense that people are just going to talk about the same thing. And they already were talking about similar. It's kind of the same thing anyway, which is like, I feel wronged. I'm angry at something. Right. Yeah. And
everybody's angry at the same thing. And we know that everybody's angry. Right.
Right. It's like, I understand and I appreciate your venting. You're trying to show your anger. But when you see it for the 200th time, you too get angry because it's like, get a grip. Like we're all in the same boat. Now some people are in far worse situations. And from there I go, okay, I feel like there's like legitimacy if someone's willing to help you. You do that through a post. In that case, that's great. Good for you. But I know the people who are posting and I go, well, yes, I understand you're frustrated, but count your blessings too. You're not in a situation where every bill means life or death for you, right? And and that's something that's really important to note because there are people who I know that live really paycheck to paycheck. That they're living by the pennies. And one thing is that the most amazing thing about it is that they just keep rolling. I think that they're probably too worried about everything else to really complain because they go, well, I can't complain now. Otherwise I'm in trouble. And I think it's one of those weird things that I think that when people get angry and then they try to make a movement, you have to understand that you have to make something that's going to be really effective for people who can't do that. So yes, you can be the loudest person in the room and advocate for this idea, but if it doesn't impact the people who cannot join you in that cause because they're impacted by other issues, then what's the point?
For me, it was kind of like, not only was I bothered by the people on Facebook, but, and I think you kind of said this too, but I was tempted, despite the fact that I'm annoyed by all this, I'm tempted to write back and do the same thing I'm annoyed by.
Right.
And I hate myself for that. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I think that sometimes we feel like we're doing the right thing because we want to provide clarification, but that clarification gets so muddled because of our emotions. And then we start saying stuff that does not help the situation. It makes it much worse. And even consider the fact that Facebook and a lot of these social media sites, I think there are articles that legitimately they've gotten interviews with people who worked for these companies and these social media companies. And they say, yeah, we actually use techniques to keep you addicted onto these sites.
Absolutely. And that's another thing that has really, really bothered me about Facebook. The good thing is I never got into Twitter.
Right.
I never got into Instagram. I never got in. Like, Facebook was my thing. Mm-hmm. MySpace was really my thing because I'm that old. Right. I loved MySpace. I don't know if you're old enough to remember MySpace.
I remember MySpace. I wanted a MySpace account. And then my family said, no, you can have a Facebook, but no MySpace. And then I started reading articles on some of the shady things that happen on there. And I go, oh, internet. And then just all the shady stuff got transferred to Facebook anyway. So I go,
Well, back then, like, music was the thing. Like, everybody wanted you to, I was a musician at the time, and I wanted everybody to hear my music, so I had a music page. And I think the downfall of MySpace was, hey, check out my band.
Yeah, right.
So I was the problem,
Sure, yeah.
Plus, you had to know HTML, which I didn't know HTML, but I did. I learned just enough HTML to be able to learn to use MySpace. Everybody had their profile song, which is something that you don't have anymore. It's kind of like when you're a baseball player and you walk out into the field and your song comes on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You could do that. That was kind of how MySpace worked. So if somebody logged onto your page, like you could be at work and you could log on to somebody's page, which you shouldn't be logging onto MySpace at work, but I did it a lot anyway. And then like the music would pop up. I'm like, shit!
It's like, no. You could say, no, boss. I'm doing a MySpace project where I'm using the songs to test whether or not it impacts me positively. After all, we need more positive thinking around here, boss.
Oh, well, it helped that I worked in the music industry too. So
right.
But I click on my girlfriend's page at the time, my girlfriend at the time's page, and I got a pocket full of sunshine. I got a love, and I know that it's all mine. Oh, whoa. So every time I'm in, I don't know why, but it's always the grocery stores when I hear this song nowadays. Every time I'm at a grocery store and Pocket Full of Sunshine comes on, it's like, oh, I remember my ex-girlfriend, you know?
Yeah, right.
She was nice, you know, but it's weird. It's like this weird psychological thing that when I hear that song at the grocery store, that my mind goes back to that moment, back to that office where I would check out my girlfriend's MySpace page, and I think of her every time.
Yeah,
it's weird, man.
That is definitely strange. Like I don't have that same affiliation with like a song, and I go, oh, I remember this exact moment in my life with this particular song. It's just so strange. There's only one, but there's like a genre of songs that will trigger something in my mind. Like if I hear like country rap, and for some reason, like the country, like the country rap reminds me of the time where I saved someone's life, because the person was playing country music before the incident happened. And then I had to leap into action to save their life. So anytime a country rap thing comes on, like Yellow Wolf, I go, oh yeah, I did do that thing that one time. That was scary.
You know what the abbreviation for country rap is, right?
What's that?
Crap.
Hot takes here at the Cleveland Podcast. That's right. If you listen to country rap, it is CRAP.
So actually, when I lived down there in Nashville, one of my friends was in the music mafia. And if you don't know what that is, it's a series of bands that were kind of had a network, and the big one at the top was Big and Rich.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys in that band was Cowboy Troy. And he was like a country rapper.
You know, it's interesting that that now there's like this new explosion in like not country rap per se, but rap with country influence. Like I'm pretty sure you remember like Old Town Road. That was like playing all over the radio.
Yeah.
And then, then you had other rap songs. Like I think it's called I'm a Cowboy by Lil Tracy, and just like all these different, all of a sudden we have these new country, like rap with country influence, but not country rap. And so those I'm like, that's not too bad. But then when I listen to that country rap, there are some songs that I do like, but sometimes I listen to certain songs and I just remember the night that, saving someone's life. But at the same time, though, I got free keys for the rest of my life, though, so I don't have to pay for keys again, at least in this apartment complex.
So I think everybody in Cleveland is probably turning this podcast off at this point, because we're talking about country music.
Yeah, right.
And I'm about to go into NASCAR.
Oh, yeah.
So,
there's been some interesting stuff that's happened with NASCAR.
They've gotten rid of the Confederate flag. You're not allowed to have a Confederate flag at a NASCAR race.
Now, that's interesting. So, actually, what's your opinion on the whole Confederate situation with the statues and the flags?
I remember when I was 19 years old and I went to college, and my roommate was from West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
He had a Confederate flag on our wall in the dorm. You know what I mean?
Which is super ironic. You know what's super ironic?
Why? What?
West Virginia separated from Virginia during the Civil War because they wanted to be part of the Union. They actually wanted nothing to do with the Confederacy. So a guy from West Virginia with a Confederate flag is rather funny. Although there were plenty of Confederate people in West Virginia, but they split off because they're like, yeah, no, we're done with this. We're going to the Union. Bye, Virginia.
So West Virginia went north and Virginia stayed south?
Mm-hmm.
So, I went into the dorm, and there's a Confederate flag hanging on the wall, and I'm like, dude, this is kind of this is like slavery.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, it doesn't mean that to us. So it's a symbol of rebellion.
Right. Right.
It's a symbol of the South. And, and then years later, I don't like going to West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Charleston's kind of cool just to drive through, but I keep driving.
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of the part of the South that I don't really like to go to either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I used to have a friend from Mississippi, and she's like, "You want to go home and meet my dad?" And I'm like, "Mississippi?"
Right, of all places, Mississippi. But Mississippi's got good Civil War sites. I will admit that.
She's like, started telling me a story about her 300-pound hog that hung out in the front yard, and I'm like, "No." I met her dad. Her dad was a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't want to go to Mississippi. You know.
That is totally fair. So here we go. So I found it. So West Virginia was the only state in the Union to separate from a Confederate state during the American Civil War. So this is all true. According to Wikipedia.com, and actually there's another source right here. I know that partially slavery and states' rights did play a huge role in the eventual secession. And it really accelerated the issue further. Because I think West Virginia was kind of thinking about it. And then once the Civil War happened, they went, okay, like we got to separate.
Holy crap, there's a squirrel approaching me.
Yes,
He's
indeed.
He's looking at me.
The squirrel is trying to think, I'm going to eat those Caesar leaves. That's why I am in a nice little apartment here with my beautifully solidifying liquefied mud or liquefied earth.
Safe from squirrels.
Yes, exactly. Well, squirrels don't like me. They scamper off. They see all the sludge and they go, no. Maybe he wants to be interviewed.
He'd probably run away. So
yeah, right.
I doubt.
Oh, but so then what about the Confederate statues? You know, I'm pretty sure you've heard about that.
I kind of get it.
Sure,
but
yeah.
I kind of feel like people want to erase history. And
yeah.
I don't. Okay, here's something more local. They just decided to take the Christopher Columbus statue out of Columbus.
Right.
They're redoing that whole area anyway.
Right.
And that's only 2 hours away from here. Your city's name is still Columbus.
It's true, but at the same time, I get it too. Like I think I think they agreed to remove a Columbus statue over in Cleveland, didn't they?
Oh, I don't know.
I think they did that recently. I'll double check that, but they decided to replace the statue with Chef Boyardee, and so it was really fascinating because I went, Chef Boyardee, he has a connection to Cleveland, and all of a sudden I didn't realize that Chef Boyardee, he kind of made his living in Parma. That's where all this stuff started for him.
Really?
Yeah, right. So it's like, I'm like, yeah, replace Columbus with Chef Boyardee because Columbus never got to Ohio. I'm like, yeah, replace him with Chef Boyardee. But still, like, I guess from my perspective, right, because I'm studying all this history in just all these different universities, the tough part is that it is true. The South were traitors to the United States government. But at the same time, the South is also part of the American story, and it's part of the American people, and it's a quintessential part too. So I feel like that while it's probably not best to have statues dedicated to Confederates generals all over the place, you know, because we have too many of those. Because in the early 20th century, we had like these really big Confederate advocacy groups that were saying that, well, we need to commemorate the South during the war. And the government was like, okay, sure, why not? And so they put all these statues everywhere. And now the issue is there are Confederate statues in places that really don't have much of a connection to the places that they're located. And then and so now I'm like, yeah, get rid of those and replace it. So if you're going to replace a statue like Columbus in Ohio, I'm like, that's fine because Columbus had no connection other than maybe if you're the capital with the name Columbus.
But they name the city after him.
Yeah, right.
It's like, I mean, put your money where your mouth is. You know what I mean?
I suppose.
If you're gonna remove the statue, put the millions of dollars
to change the city's name.
Change the name of the city.
I mean, and I think that's fair. That's totally a fair point. And I feel like that, you know, for those Confederate statues and the statues of Columbus that get removed, you want to probably preserve them and put them in a museum. I mean, I remember I went to Nuremberg, where like kind of the most famous place for Nazism, and they have a whole dang museum. I'm just like, yeah, this is not a proud part of our history, but we can't just deny it. So I'm hoping that all this activity to remove these statues will lead to, maybe getting some better statues up there, which I just looked up. Turns out Little Italy had a Columbus statue here in Cleveland, and they just agreed to, there's a whole movement to remove it and replace it with Chef Boyardee, which just makes total sense because of the whole Parma thing. But at the same time, going back to the Confederate statues, though, you just can't get rid of those things because you can't just remove that history. That happened. That was the bloodiest war in American history. You just can't go and say, well, the Union won, It was about slavery, end of story. It's much more complicated because so much of the South's history afterwards completely changes American history. It's not just some forgotten region or some recently added region like Alaska or Hawaii. No offense to their history. It's very diverse, but it's not the same impact as an entire region that has had states in it since the 18th century, since the very beginning of our nation. And so if you're going to remove those statues, you probably need to put them in Confederate museums that say, wow, this is not a proud part of our history. It does exist and people should know about it, because history is never pretty. It's not meant to be some dolled up appearance in terms of, oh, everything we did was good. And I worry that people will start to do that, even if they say, oh, well, we are not trying to do that. My worry is that people will start to just almost unintentionally do that. And as a result, it will lead to history being forgotten. And then we just repeat this over and over. And then we have these reemergence in violence and just more issues. I mean, heck, just in due to the fact that history is repeating itself now with all the protests. History is repeating itself all over again. And yet we never learn from it. And as a result, they keep happening again and again and again. And it's no wonder that people get so frustrated, because they go, this is happening all over again. So then they have to do it again and again and again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's a good point.
And I think that when we talk about the totality of this pandemic, it really is something that is showing the ugly side of the United States. And the most important thing about this is that we cannot forget this. We can't be like the Confederate statues and remove the history of the corona pandemic. We need to learn from it and grow from it. And I think that in due time, when all this is afterwards, I think we'll do that. But right now, it just doesn't feel that way. But I have reason to hope for the future that we will remember our history and maybe even do more diligence for it.
We need to make a statue of that coronavirus with the little prickly things on each side.
Yeah, it's how we could say, never forget.
100 years from now, they'll be like, tear that down, bitch.
Oh, dear. Indeed, that is indeed the status of the official statement of the Cleveland podcast. Make a coronavirus statue. We'll place it somewhere. Who knows? But anyway, thank you everyone for listening to our update on the whole coronavirus. Again, in almost July, and we'll be coming back with more crazy content for all of you. Thank you everyone for listening, and stay healthy.
Thanks for listening to the show. You can find us online at facebook.com/The Cleveland Podcast, or get links to all of our various different social media pages at theclevelandpodcast.com. Our episode notes for this and other episodes can be found in the photo albums on our Facebook page. You can follow along as you listen, as well as learn more from our sources about the subjects that we cover. You can also find links on our website to our YouTube channel, Spreaker, Google Play, Apple iTunes, Spotify, and more. Leave us a voicemail at 216-200-7940. Send us an email at theclevelandpodcast@gmail.com, or interact with us on Reddit, Facebook, or Twitter. We'd love to use your comments, ideas, and feedback in the show. We are a community-based podcast, so the more community interaction, the better. Have a great day, Cleveland.